All right, good evening, everybody. My name is Jonathan Newsma, council member for the 4th Ward, and I will be chairing Administration and Public Works this evening, July 25th. I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order.
Recording in progress.
And let's start off with a roll call just to capture everybody that is participating.
Councilmember Kelly. Here. Councilmember Newsma.
Here.
Councilmember Burns.
Here.
Councilmember Reed.
Here.
Councilmember Reed is online. So let's go ahead and get started. If someone would like to make a motion on approval of the minutes.
So moved.
And I do have actually one small correction. If you give me 1 second on that. Sorry, I've got the last agenda open, ANPW. Sorry, that was something else. So it's been properly moved and seconded. All in favor of approving the minutes for July 11th, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries, which brings us to public comment. I believe there are 2 people signed up for public comment, Mr. Vasilko in person and Mary Rosinski online. So we will start with Mr. Vasilko in person.
Five minutes, right?
According to Rule 6.2, Paragraph 2, it's a 2-minute limit.
2 minutes, all right. Well, on the bills list, start right in. So this is your last opportunity, I think, to use the leverage of dollars you have against Bully and Andrews for the cracked concrete and other things that have gone wrong in Robert Crown Center. I'm asking that you withdraw the $108,000 that is being shown as a payment towards Bully and Andrews on the bills list. Last I heard, there was going to be a report from Miss Janie Elsner. I have not seen that report or heard that it's been contracted for, and that should take place before you make any final payments. The other item is A10, which is a large change order, I guess a no bid change order for Capital Cement. They're asking for, or you've given them, over $300,000 an additional fee for work that it was said in the memo. There were bids, but they weren't qualified bids for the same work. So I'm not sure what not qualified bids, what the judgment was on that, but it seemed like that work should be pulled out and rebid, if necessary, push it off into next year. I don't see what the urgency is for that. There's a lot of change orders on this list, and then there are so many requests for GO bonds to be approved, and yet the council hasn't voted on any GO bonds this year. A3 is $103,000 for GO bonds. A4 is a $45 million loan. A5, $50,000 for GO bonds. A6, $350,000 for GO bonds. A8, $80,000 for GO bonds, and others. It seems to me you should be able to have a discussion about how much bonding
2 minutes,
you want
sir.
to take place before you approve any of these. So here again, the cart's before the horse. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else in the room who wishes to address the committee? Seeing none, we'll go to those online, and I believe Mary Rosinski is online.
Hi, Mary Rosinski. I'm not sure I'm at the right meeting for this. I wanted to speak to the issue of Poplar renovation. Is that the next meeting?
Poplar is on this agenda.
It is on this agenda? Okay, because what I was going to say is I think this is not the right time to be doing Poplar. There's a lot of question with the neighbors who don't want it, and it's $1.3 million project. And we don't know when we're going to be replacing those lead lines. So I would hate for us to spend $856,000 of, Evanston taxpayer dollar, and then another $500,000 of state of Illinois tax dollars for a project that we then may rip up in 2 or 3 or 4 years. So until we have more understanding of when that'll happen, I'd like us to see that put on hold. I also know that the neighbors are not in favor of it. So that's all my comment is. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Rosinski, is there anybody else in the room or online who wishes to address the committee?
Not that I know of. Not today. I mean, I know there's people who would like to, but I think they may address council.
Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Mary. All right, in that case, we will move ahead with the consent agenda. Councilmember Kelly has already indicated she would like to remove items A1, A5, and A9. Councilmember Burns, Councilmember Reed, do you wish to remove any other items? A6 will take off consent. A15 is for consideration, so we don't have to remove it.
A10 also, did I say that already? A10?
We'll add A10. Councilmember Reed, anything you'd like to remove? All right, so we have,
No.
we'll be removing A1, A5, A6, A9, and A10. If someone would like to make a motion on the consent agenda with the exception of those items.
Moved, consent agenda.
It's been
Second.
properly moved
Second.
by Councilmember Kelly, seconded by Councilmember Burns, that we approve the consent agenda, which includes items A2, A3, A4, A7, A8, A11, 12, and 13. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? That motion carries unanimously, which brings us to item A1. Okay. Can somebody make a motion on item A1?
I move item A1.
Second.
It's been properly moved by Councilmember Reed and seconded by Councilmember Kelly. Is there any discussion on item A1? Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you. Just to acknowledge Mr. Vasilko's question and for the public, and also a little bit for me. I think I got most of it answered today, so thank you. But in reference to the payment for Bullying Andrews, maybe there's more outstanding payments due, correct? Beyond the $108,000?
Members of the council, my name is Laura Biggs. I'm the city engineer. So that is correct. Following this payment, there's still $424,000 of outstanding payments.
Okay, great. And to have West Jenny come in, if that's, I have no idea what the cost would be involved to examine some of the issues that have come up in a short amount of time there. Would that be, would that have to be a referral, or if it's under 25,000, can staff just recommend?
I'd like clarification as to what is, depends on what you want investigated. So
Right.
I don't know.
The cracks. And I think there's some issues with the glass, but the cracks in particular.
So I need to know, is it just the cracks? Is it cracks, windows? We need to understand the scope of work so we can request a proposal from them. So
Okay.
I don't know how much the proposal would be.
Okay. Okay, so I'll send that to you, and
Yes,
then we
that'd
can
be
see
fine.
whether or not that requires a referral or not.
If it would be spending money that's not in the budget, but we'd have to, we would have to make a report to the city council that we're spending money that wasn't allocated in the budget.
Okay. All right,
Okay.
thank you. And I had one other question about the bills pay list, which I didn't have a chance to email about. I'm just, the payment for, I'm not sure what line item it is, I just wrote it down, Greeley and Hanson, I think it is. It's this relatively small payment, but it's coming from a 2019 bond, and I'm just trying to understand how that works, because I think we approved it later, but we're paying for it out of a 2019 bond. How does that work? I mean, is that standard, just to take money from a bond that was maybe, because I assume that the 2019 bond was earmarked for other purposes?
Unfortunately, I just don't have that information at my fingertips, so I can provide you that information following this meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Could you tell us what page it's on, at least?
Sorry, the bills pay is tricky. I just wrote it down in my notebook, but I can, it was for a payment for Greeley and Hanson, I think.
Yeah.
And I think it was for like $6,000 or $7,000, but I'll see if I can locate it, and
Okay.
I'll email it to you.
On page 29 of 301, there's 66.44 and 90 cents for Greeley and Hanson, if that's what you're talking about. Up at the top. All right. Any other questions on item A1, the bills list? Seeing none, and with the full committee now present, I will call for another voice vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, item A1 passes unanimously, which brings us to item A5. If somebody would like to make a motion on item A5.
I move approval of A5 contract award for Boulder Contractors, Inc. for Poplar Avenue Street and Parking Lot Improvements, bid number 22-43.
And did I hear a second? It's been properly moved by Councilmember Burns and seconded by Councilmember Kelly. Is there any discussion on item A5? Councilmember Kelly.
So I guess, could we get an sort of an explanation? I know there's been some emails back and forth, but some of it seems slightly conflicting, the purpose of this large project for Poplar Avenue. I think the public had a lot of questions about that.
Members of the Administrative Public Works Committee, I'm Chris Manata, Senior Project Manager here with the City of Evanston. So this contract, we're addressing the deteriorated parking lot 54, that's in need of repair. It's been on our capital improvements program for the last several years. And this year, we've also combined it with the street, which also needs resurfacing as well. And through our design of this project, we've also identified water main that needs replaced at the same time between Central Street and Harrison Street.
So when I looked at the map, it looks like that water main really only covers about that chunk, like one or two houses, correct?
Yeah,
It's very limited.
So each year, the city, we develop a 5-year water main replacement program where we identify the next 5 years of programs of streets that will need their water mains improved. And so this was on that list. So when we went to design the street improvements, we also identified that water main needed to be replaced at the same time, so we wouldn't have to come back in a short period of time to replace it.
Thank you. So, so this is some 800,000 plus of local dollars, plus another 500,000 from a state, I can't remember the name of the fund, the state fund.
Rebuild Illinois.
Rebuild Illinois. So it's like over $1 million project. I know a lot of the neighbors that live there are really concerned, that their street's going to be to make it better when they weren't even nobody was asking for this. So I feel very strongly that there needs to be at least one community meeting for community input when their front streets are going to be, dug up. And I just think that hasn't happened yet. So I would ask if we could just hold this and hold that community meeting, because I think people are feeling a little bit like this is just happening without their input and voice on this. So if I could move to hold this until we have a community meeting with the neighbors, that would be great.
Point
Deputy
of
Manager,
information, table.
Or table it, sorry. Table it until there's a community meeting. I think it'll, the project would go more smoothly, and I just think that's really important at this point.
Councilmember Kelly, are you making that motion?
I am
or are
making a
you-
motion to table this until there's a community meeting.
And is there a second?
I will second that, but I do have just a question.
Okay. Let's hear from Deputy Director Stoneback, and then I have a question as well.
This is actually in the 7th Ward, and we've coordinated very well with the 7th Ward council member, and she is in favor of this project. And as far as I understand, she has the knowledge that most of the residents along the affected street are okay with the project moving forward. So we're taken back that there is a concern. We did exchange emails with a resident today to explain some of his concerns, but staff is unaware of, a lot of neighbors complaining about this and are aware that the council member involved in their ward, she was satisfied with this project. So there were issues that had to be worked out about diagonal parking and providing parking for the residents that live along the street. And those issues had been resolved previously before we made the recommendation to award.
And I did speak with Councilmember Revelle prior to our last meeting briefly on this, and she indicated that in her conversations with the community members that they were mostly on board. We didn't really go into detail. So I'll endorse what Deputy Director Stoneback just said. Councilmember Reed?
That was my question. I was curious what council member, just a reminder of what ward this is in, and what the council member thought. And so if that's what, how council member Revelle feels, and she has to represent the residents of her ward, and that, I'll
Yeah, I
give
did.
some
I
deference.
texted her today to see. Sorry.
Councilmember Burns?
I was going to say I'd be happy to move this forward just to hear from Councilmember Revelle directly. I'm sure she'll be here at the council meeting, or no? Is she out of town?
That's what I'm going to suggest, but I'm not sure.
She's not coming.
here.
Okay.
Not
So
gonna
I
be
have
here.
I mean, this isn't stopping it, and I know she supports her community, and she wouldn't. I'm going to venture that she would also appreciate a community meeting so that she knows her residents are on board. I've received many of the same emails she's received. It certainly can't hurt to have a community meeting to proceed. This is a large project of digging up neighbor streets, so I don't think. I think this is in everybody's benefit to just hold that community meeting. This should be done whenever, there's any major work such as this done, and the neighbors are not feeling like they've had proper.
Staff would struggle to have community meetings before every project similar to this. We're doing $4.5 million of water main work on 5 or 6 different streets. So you're suggesting we would need to have a community member meeting with each one of those streets?
I think for lead water, everybody understands the issues there, the safety involved, but here, in terms of their street, feeling that their street needed resurfacing or repaving, or initially, what I was told initially was that it was because of the 3 feet that we were, having to pay a percentage of the proceeds from parking to Union Pacific, and it was to get those 3 feet back, and now I'm hearing it's, so there've been sort of conflicting rationale about this expensive project, and I know the neighbors that live on that street are very concerned about it and do feel that they would like to be able to have a community meeting to really understand the full length, the full impact, how long it's going to last, the reasoning, and for city staff to hear from them. This isn't, the water main is a very little tiny chunk of.
Right.
of
The majority of the project is to resurface the parking lot, which is in deplorable shape right now, somewhat of a safety hazard. In addition, we are looking to move off the Union Pacific property, which is a third, 3 feet of the parking lot that currently exists. So the need is to resurface the parking lot. The secondary need is to not be on Union Pacific property within that parking lot because of the rent that we have to pay and the knowledge that they're hiring a realtor now to try to get the best dollar that they can for their property. And at some point, we could wind up paying big dollars to be able to be using that 3 feet. So as we resurface the lot, the plan was to move the lot off of their property. And then that does impact the street, and therefore the street needs to be resurfaced. A small section, as you indicate, needs new water main. But, and again, the ward alderman is satisfied with the project, so.
But I think we can't speak for her. She's not
Councilmember
here.
Reed.
I'm sorry.
And if the ward alderman asked us to hold a community meeting, then we would do it when the ward alderman asked us to do that.
Councilmember Reed.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I seconded this to get the question answered of how Councilmember Ravel felt about it. But I do have two questions. So, one, if we were to hold off on this, even just to the next meeting until Councilmember Ravel is here, what would the impact of that be? Would that negatively impact the project, I guess is really what I'm asking.
With water main, there are certain long lead items, so we'd have to assess that impact. There's always some issue as we get towards the end of the construction season that you go into more variability, especially when you get towards the end of September and October. So we do try to get as many construction projects underway as soon as possible. So it adds a level of uncertainty towards the back end of the season.
When is this scheduled? When is the actual work scheduled to be to take place?
We expect construction usually to start within 2 or 3 weeks of award from a council meeting, because at that time we have to sign contracts and go through all the paperwork.
And how long will it take?
They believe the current construction completion date is at the end of October.
So it'd be somewhere in the middle of August until October?
That is correct.
That's a pretty long time. Okay.
Middle of September.
I'm sorry?
Delaying it would push the completion date till the middle of September. You said the end of October. I'm sorry, to the middle of November.
Correct. Most likely we'd run into issues doing any final restoration on the project.
So if we delay it, we risk getting into bad weather winter season.
That is correct.
So the resurfacing isn't urgent. I just want to, right, I mean, it's just the water main, the very, very small, it's like one house or two houses. The water main, I mean, that perhaps, proceed, but I don't think it's really fair to speak for Councilmember Ravel this evening.
Hold on. Okay, so I want to continue with my question because I was asking a direct question that wasn't.
Let's stick with Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, this wasn't. But so my next question is, can you just? I'm curious what the impact on residents. Is it just that there's a construction zone near them, or what's going on in the life of a resident as this is going on? Is there water shut off for a period of time?
So this project could be very similar to our other street resurfacing projects we do in town, or our water main projects for the section between Central and Harrison Street. So daytime parking closures while we resurface, redo curbs and sidewalks in the parking lot as well.
But will water be shut off at any point during the water main? I would imagine
There
that
will be some interruptions to water service, yes.
And so I'm likely not going to support the hold or the table at this point and just move this forward to council. But I will say that on Brummel, I think in my ward, we recently had a street resurfacing. Is that Brummel? Is that correct? Or is that Dobson?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure which street we.
Okay. Well, we recently had a project where there's a water main replacement.
Dewey.
Huh?
On Dewey.
I think maybe there are multiple, but I got a lot of complaints from residents where, one, they, and maybe Edgar Cano is maybe familiar with this because I know that you've been on some of the email chains, but and am I confusing anything? Am I confusing the kind of project?
Edgar Cano, Acting Public Works Agency Director. Yes, I believe you're speaking about the citywide patching program is the emails that I was on.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I had residents also complaining about their water being off for a period of time. There wasn't great communication between the cities, so maybe that wasn't something that you're on. But I just want to make sure that as we're doing this project that we are ensuring that we're doing it in a timely fashion and that we're communicating with residents effectively. I think that there have been a number of projects in my ward recently where residents have certainly reached out and expressed, various levels of consternation about communication from the city on a number of projects that we've been doing and inconveniences, and the best that we can reduce that experience. I think that's what everyone wants, and so just want to flag that and make sure that we're communicating with the contractor in a way that sets hopefully as always the highest expectations.
Understood.
Is that it? Councilmember Kelly.
Councilmember Newsma, can I just, I know this is out of normal.
I'm sorry,
but I live in
I'm going to go to Councilmember Kelly. Sorry, Ms. Rosinski.
I'll defer. She's a neighbor in that area. I'll defer to Ms. Rosinski.
I just wanted to point out to with Alderman Reed is one of the issues that there should have been a public discussion is that a number of those properties are landlocked, and if they take all the parking off the street and it's all the commuter parking right there, then Broadway is completely parked up at night, as is Chancellor, and everything within like 3 blocks. So without a plan and without a discussion, I think that those people are stuck. Now, some of them do have a curb cut, but it's more than just like if on my street, I can go over to Eastwood or whatever and not have to worry about carrying groceries or kids 3 blocks. So that's why I think it was a thought of.
Thank you. Councilmember Kelly. Sorry, I'd like to limit discussion to committee members unless there's a resident who's directly and personally
There
impacted.
was, though, one of the residents who has, I think, 2 homes on that, I'm just noticing, wanted you to read this as public comment because she couldn't be here this evening. Shall I read it on her behalf? She asked that this be presented as public comment.
And I am a block away. I'm within that thing.
Do you want me to read? She asked that you read this for her, for public comment.
Let me just hear from Councilmember Burns first, and then I'll go back to Councilmember Kelly.
So I just want to make sure I'm looking at the right place. So this is Poplar that dead ends, and then the golf course begins, correct?
Yeah, it starts at Livingston on the north to the dead end south of Colfax on the south.
But all the work is concentrated in this area.
Yes, along Poplar between those limits with a
Okay.
gap at Central Street.
I mean, this changes my opinion a little bit in that you don't go to this area unless you live here. I'm very familiar with this area, and so I would hope that not necessarily a community meeting, but that Councilmember Ravel had some discussions with the neighbors about this, because this is the type of street where you really do want to hear from the immediate neighbors because they're the only ones that really use these streets back here. So I don't know if you know any meetings or conversations she's had.
We did have a small neighborhood meeting. We flyered the block. Unfortunately, we didn't have the showing that we would have hoped for this project because initially we were expecting some parking changes on the north side, which is why we wanted to let the residents know, the community members. We had this a neighborhood meeting, but unfortunately only a few showed up to it.
But you did flyer the area?
We did.
We
flyered the limits.
You didn't
from
mail
Livingston.
anybody, right? Like you do with like planned development stuff?
No, there were no mailings. It's similar to our project newsletters that we do on all of our projects.
Just put some on the door and.
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay.
If I may, I know many people didn't get the flag. Oh, I'm sorry, Bob.
I mean, it just would be nice to check in with Councilwoman Ravel, but I guess if she
I
told
had a
you.
discussion with her prior to our last meeting. She had indicated that she had some conversations with the neighbors and felt ready to move this forward for introduction last time.
Yeah, so I mean, as long as she's supportive, I'm supportive, but yeah, okay.
So I'm going to support this as well. Councilmember Kelly, I think that the wind is blowing in the direction of at least 3 people in support.
Understood.
If you'd like to read.
Yeah, I just want to say that I
this
know many
email
people
into
didn't
record.
get the flyer, and that was the problem, and that's why only like 2 or 3 showed up at most. And we did have a public comment here from Ms. Stieglitz, who could not be here this evening. She says, would you please read my email and questions?
Just
Jonathan?
point of information, does she live on this block?
She does.
Okay,
She has
thank
2
you.
homes on that block.
Okay.
And questions, when the site is not, if possible, answers would be great, but my guess is that won't be entirely possible since most of the neighbors are also not aware this is on the agenda tonight. Would you consider holding it pending a neighborhood meeting? Also, why is it on the consent agenda at council tonight? I thought more time was supposed to be provided for input by residents. I own 3 properties on the north side of Poplar, so 3, that will be impacted with this work. The city put flyers in the doors to notify us of a meeting, but my tenants at all 3 properties did not share the notification. I was only made aware after the project was issued for bid by the city of Evanston. I did reach out to both Eleanor Revelle and then Laura Biggs to understand the motivation for this project. Questions. Why wouldn't the city notify the property owners of such a large project? Much like a zoning variance project has notification procedures. There are not that many directly impacted, but this project does have significant impact to the immediate neighborhood, and the impact will be more significant in some areas where parking is being eliminated. Will this roadway project impact our property values and or real estate taxes? Was this Poplar Avenue project explicitly listed in the capital improvement budget for 2022? I don't remember it. Laura Biggs indicated that the project was needed because the city leases 3 feet of land from Union Pacific and that parallel parking on the Poplar would be eliminated. Since then, and because none of those neighbors objected or because they aren't aware, parallel parking will remain on the north side. I appreciate that, but the south side will still lose their street parking. Is that because none of those neighbors objected or because they aren't aware of the project? Diagonal parking was added to the north side parking, but according to the memo, it will be accessed from the south. This seems like an odd way to have the diagonal parking if the parallel parking is going in the opposite direction. Did the city have a roadway engineer design the change? What is the width of the new street? How were you able to achieve diagonal parking, parallel street parking, and a 2-way street while giving back the 3 feet to the Union Pacific? Did anyone consider diagonal parking going to the north direction with parallel parking and a 1-way street? It would seem like a much safer condition for all, especially since access to Green Bay going north from Poplar has been permanently eliminated. Has this change been included in the project bids so there will be no change orders to this project? The city memo indicates that the project includes the complete replacement of lead service lines between Central Street and Harrison Street. There are only 2 properties between Central Street and Harrison Street. What about the rest of the properties? Is that accurate? Why wouldn't you replace all the lead service lines? I'm almost done. How many properties are affected by this project and how many have service pipe replacement? Will the city come back at another time to replace lead service pipes and tear up the street for this work? What year is the replacement of lead service pipes scheduled for this area? I guess I don't understand the prioritization of this expensive project. I would not say, quote, the surface of the parking lot is severely deteriorated as noted by staff, nor would I say it is smart to spend almost $1 million to save $11,000 on a lease when no one is asking for this project except for the city of Evanston staff. I appreciate your considerations. Trish Stieglitz.
Thank you, Councilmember Kelly. I forwarded that email to Mr. Venata prior to this meeting, so rather than spend committee time addressing these questions one by one, we'll just make a request if you would be so kind as to answer these questions to the best of your ability in an email, and we'll respond that way. I would like to keep moving forward here, Councilmember Kelly.
Would it be possible to hold till the end of APW in case Councilmember Revelle is able to weigh in? I have a feeling she would be supporting her residents here, saying yes, of course, she would want a community meeting. In case she can call in before the end of our meeting.
What I would suggest is if we pass it here at APW, it goes to council, and if Councilmember Revelle is at council, she can have she can take advantage of that time to address those issues herself. Okay,
and Alderman Burns, just for the record, many more are impacted besides the neighbors. This is a commuter area, so you have commuters, Northwestern, many others.
Yeah, I was just speaking loosely. You have people that park there and go to work on the train. Northwestern, during Northwestern games, people park back there. But I guess my main point is I don't know if it's residents. It sounds like it's a resident. I think flyering in areas is the next best thing is to actually knock on the doors. If somebody's not home, then you leave it, but that takes a ton of time that I know we don't have. But flyering in the area is not bad. There's contact information on there. I've done that for similar meetings around parking, and it was enough to light up my, residents lit up my email box. So I think that's sufficient. I think a flyering of an area is sufficient.
it does seem like a fairly straightforward resurfacing project, water main project with free lead service replacements. Let's point that out.
The parking configuration.
Residents don't have to pay for anything. The only thing that makes it a little bit odd is restructuring the straight-in parking to diagonal parking. Yeah, that's a justifiable change. So I'm ready to move forward on this. If there are no further questions, let's do a roll call.
Well, just procedurally, there's.
I'm sorry. There is a motion on the hold,
Tabling.
on the table, which had been properly moved by Councilmember Kelly and seconded by Councilmember Reed. Are you,
We can just vote. I mean, you can call the question.
okay,
voice
are you
vote.
withdrawing your second?
No.
Okay, so we are now voting on the motion to table. Now, let's call a roll on that.
Councilmember Kelly. Councilmember Newsma.
No.
Councilmember Burns.
No.
Councilmember Reed.
No.
That motion fails, which brings us to the underlying motion, which is on item A5, approving the contract. That had been properly moved and seconded, so I will call the roll on that question.
Councilmember Kelly. Councilmember Newsma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
That motion carries by a vote of 3-1 and will go to council for action. Which brings us to item A6, bid 22-46, the sidewalk improvement with Schroeder and Schroeder. If somebody would like to make a motion on item A6.
So moved.
And seconded by,
Second.
it's been properly moved by Councilmember Reed, seconded by Councilmember Burns. Is there any discussion on item A6? Councilmember Burns.
Just so one, and I don't know if this has made its way up the channels yet, but in the NWEBE committee, we've asked that on when there is an NWEBE waiver or a local employment waiver, that is written into the agenda item headline so that we know to pay close attention to it. So I would like that moving forward. And then just wanted an explanation on this particular waiver. It seems like there was quite a bit of cost difference between the two bids. And so it seems like there may have been some room for the winning bidder to bring on NWEBE business. And I know the justification for the waiver is that bringing on an NWEBE business would have increased the cost or something like that. So, but the difference between the two bids were, I don't know, like 300, 400,000. It was pretty significant. So I'm just trying to understand why that waiver was, I guess, requested and granted.
So this project is for sidewalk replacement. It's a very, let me say, simple work. The contractor will remove a slab of concrete and pour new concrete in. So there's not much room for subcontracting abilities. So the only other option would be hiring a different contractor to completely take over parts of the scope. And I know we've had issues in the past with not having the main contractor perform the full replacement, how it's phased with the sidewalk replacement program, which is why we.
So there's no room. It's not a big enough project to subcontract any of it out.
It's the same process that only one contractor will work on throughout the different phases of work that happens.
I wish you would have said that then, and not that it would add cost. That was a little confusing because I mean, part of we know what may happen when we're trying to expand access to different city contracts is that folks may have to pay a bit more for different contractors, and that in and of itself should not always be a barrier. It should be something we discuss. But this seems like a different reason altogether, that there's just, okay, yeah, so that makes sense. So the main thing is, though, I think moving forward, just indicating that somebody is requesting a waiver in the headline, and but that makes sense. Thank you.
Yes, and
Oh, I did have one other question. But go ahead,
Mr.
Nick.
Desai did make us aware of your desire, but that was after most of these
No, I understand.
memos had already been written. So that is something that we will discuss at the directors' meeting tomorrow and try to move forward on future projects for that.
And then also we were going to do a workforce development program around sidewalk improvement. Is that not starting with these? That's starting with some of the
That's
ones
included
funded?
in this
That's included?
contract
Okay.
for the contractor to hire at least one Evanston worker for the project.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Any further questions on item A6? Seeing none. All in favor? Say aye. Any opposed? A6 carries unanimously, bringing us to item A9, which is the sole source renewal of the ARC GIS software with Esri Incorporated. If somebody would like to make a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved by Councilmember Reed, seconded by Councilmember Kelly. Is there any discussion on item A9? Councilmember Kelly.
Not much discussion. I support this, and I'm glad to hear through discussion email that we'll look into potentially joining the GIS consortium in '23 and save some dollars. There's almost all of our neighbors belong to a GIS consortium, so I'm happy to hear that we'll at least explore that for next year.
Good evening, members of the City Council. Interim Deputy City Manager Stoneback, Luke Stowe, Interim City Manager. Just to clarify that on the GIS consortium, Dimitri Shub did look into that, and the software licensing is the same whether you're a member of the consortium or not. The consortium is more of for smaller communities that don't have the economy of scale and don't want to have a dedicated GIS coordinator or staff. They often engage with the consortium to bring in services or outsource services to the consortium to kind of fill in some gaps. We've clearly got an economy of scale here, but the consortium pricing for software licensing would be the same as it is through the regular channels that we're going through, if that makes sense.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Because I know Skokie and all of the surrounding communities, you are members of this consortium and said they save, it's about on average 40%.
We did reach out to confirm this. So from a software licensing standpoint, it's the same exact
Okay.
pricing, whether it's through Esri or through the consortium. I think in some cases, if it's a smaller community or they have different needs than we have, it may be appropriate from a staffing perspective. So we have looked at it in the past. We actually are in the process of doing a GIS geospatial strategic plan. So we would review all kinds of things, including this type of stuff as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on item A9? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Item A9 carries unanimously, bringing us to item A10, which is change order number 1 to the agreement with Capital Cement for the 2022 alley improvements. This is bid 22-39. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved by Councilmember Reed, seconded by Councilmember Kelly. Are there any questions on item A10? Questions or comments?
Who removed it?
Councilmember Kelly, I believe you had removed that one. We'll give you a minute to. Okay. Seeing no further discussion on item A10, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Item A10 carries unanimously. Which brings us now to items for consideration, starting with item A14, which is Resolution 56-R-22, authorizing the interim city manager to execute an intergovernmental agreement for the use and maintenance of personal equipment between the Village of Palatine and the City of Evanston.
So moved.
It's been moved by Councilmember Reed and seconded by
Second.
Councilmember Burns. Any discussion on item A14? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Item A14 passes unanimously, which brings us to item A15, Ordinance 76-0-22, amending the city code to increase the number of Class L2 liquor licenses from 1 to 2. This would be for Ash Enterprises USA, doing business as Shop Now at 1942 Maple Avenue. Is there a motion?
I move denial.
Is there, how do we handle a move to deny? Is that different than simply rejecting a motion to approve? I'll direct that question to Deputy Attorney Ozuribo.
Good evening, members of the committee. Deputy City Attorney Michelle Ozuribo. If I can just have one moment to confer with Corporation Counsel.
For the sake of clarity, Dirk Price, Interim Corporation Counsel. So for the sake of clarity in the minutes and for people understanding what's voting at home, we always prefer the motion to be in the affirmative, so a no vote means no and a yes vote means yes. In this case, a yes vote means no on the motion, and that's not the best for trying to communicate to your constituents what you're doing. So we always prefer the motion to be in the affirmative, and during discussion, Councilmember Reed, you'll make your position clear, but we want yes votes to mean yes and no votes to mean no. So a friendly amendment would be to the person who made the motion to convert it to move approval, and then you can vote no. That'd be my advice.
I withdraw my motion.
Is there a motion on item A15? Councilmember Burns, this is in your ward. If you'd
Yeah,
like
not
to
for me. I do
add a
not
comment.
support this at this time, and the community is not in support.
Okay.
Well, I should say, let me be specific. Members of the Firemen's Neighborhood Group, which is the most active kind of civic group in the area, is not in support. I have not received any support letters.
All right. For lack of a motion, item A15 dies in committee, which brings us to item A16, Ordinance 77-022, amending the liquor code to increase Class B licenses from 0 to 1. This is for American Multi-Cinema, doing business as AMC Evanston 12 at 1715 Maple Street. We don't have a definitive date as to when the movie theater is going to open, but I'd like to see this moving forward. This is in the second ward, so since that seat is vacant, I will make the motion on item A16.
You need me to make it, or?
If you could second it.
Oh, second.
And just with a heads up that on behalf of the vacant Ward 2 seat, I will move to suspend rules at council for immediate action this evening. So, all in favor of item A16?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? A16 carries unanimously. Brings us to A17, Ordinance 75-0-22. Another liquor license, this one for Class D, increasing the number from 63 to 64. This is for Fortune Cookie Group, doing business as Lao Tse Chuan at 1633 Orrington Avenue. Is there a motion? It's my ward. I jumped the gun on the previous one, but
Yeah, move approval.
it's been moved by Councilmember Burns and seconded by Councilmember Kelly. And just as a heads up on this one, I will move for suspension of the rules at council later this evening. So all in favor of A17, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? A17 carries unanimously. Item A18, this is Ordinance 78-0-22, another liquor license. This one is Class C, increasing the number from 20 up to 21 for Tenoshi Foods, doing business as Tomo Japanese Street Food at 1729 Sherman Avenue. Councilmember Kelly, this one is in your ward. So is there a motion?
A motion.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Kelly, seconded by Councilmember Burns. Any discussion?
No, I'll also move for suspension of the rules, but that's at council, correct?
Yes. Okay. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of A18 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Any opposed? Motion item A18 passes unanimously. And in the interest of time, let's not fill up our agenda with additional items for discussion or items for communication. There being no further business to come before the committee, I declare this meeting adjourned.